Final feelings here before Georgia South Carolina in 2021, and it is really hard to believe that these two programs are as far away from one another as they are right now. Georgia listed above, they are a 30-point favorite and growing, listed right now as a 32-point favorite, consensus 32-point favorite going into this game. I mean, think about how difficult some of these South Carolina Georgia games were a decade ago, and it's hard to imagine that this game will be this high in the future. But 32 points, I mean, that's 4.5 touchdowns. 4.5 touchdown favorite in conference play. It's hard to imagine that people would take the dogs to cover this, but it's at that place for a reason. You know, looking at this South Carolina team and program, they're really devoid of a signal caller. Luke Doty looks like he may or may not play in this game. That's a real problem for Carolina because quarterback play has been what I would call not great to bad for them in this, and even the season ago. And if Doty does play in this game, Carolina's quarterback, two of his last 3 games will be against a Georgia defense that has just been extremely stingy. I don't see Carolina scoring high into the double digits. I mean, if they got to 20, I don't know if I'd be shocked because you're going to have Georgia playing a lot of second and third string players, but I'd be pretty surprised. But, this is just a terrible matchup for South Carolina, mainly because they're going on the road. It's going to be at night. They're playing a team that has tremendous momentum. And unlike 2019, if one player goes down, Georgia's offense is not going to get sidelined. The other thing about this game I think that's pretty curious is who's going to start for Georgia at quarterback. It is amazing to me that they are a 4.5 touchdown favorite over a team, and we don't know for sure who the starting quarterback will be. I'll tell you this much. JT Daniels needs to play. If he's the starter and he's close to 100% or healthy, and the term 100% is probably the wrong way to look at it, but if he's healthy, he needs to play and play as much as he can. You don't want to go into what is about to be the meat of the schedule, Arkansas, Auburn, and Kentucky and the Gators. You don't want to go into that 4-game stretch rusty. You want to play and play a lot. So I think that's the thing. Missing one game, a non-conference game, no big deal. But I do think if you had your way and you're Georgia, you would play JT Daniels and him be close to healthy. So that's one thing to watch for sure. Stetson played so well a week ago. It seems clear to me that he would be the he'd be the first person off the bench if Georgia is starting JT Daniels. But this is just a horrible matchup again for South Carolina. They do have some good players in spots. Their running backs are good players. They do not have an offensive line that can pave the way for them, and they really struggled to move the ball against East Carolina and score against East Carolina. You look at their defensive line, that could be a strength for Carolina, but these things are all relative. They're going to get tired. Georgia marched the ball up and down the field on Carolina last year. Now, that was with some guys from South Carolina missing. So we'll be curious to see what Carolina does on the line. But I just don't see it for South Carolina. What I'm curious to see, and one thing that we wrote about in Final Feelings, is how much will Georgia dominate this game? Is this a game where they're going to get in there, dominate immediately, and play 120 downs, 120 to 140 downs of football that's completely dominant? If you see that, that will let you know that this team is on a different level than it's been in the past. I mean, when you look at the 17 team, which I think is the direct comparison to this team, there are certainly differences. The defense is better. The running backs are not. The quarterback is better. The receivers are probably about the same. But that team was not as dominant, it doesn't seem like, on defense as these guys were. This offensive line is certainly not as good as the 2017 offensive line. So that goes hand in hand with the running backs because Georgia certainly has 4 very good running backs right now. But I want to see if Georgia is going to continue to dominate on virtually every play. I mean, teams are more often than not, actually right around 50% of the time, when teams get the ball, they are off the field within 3 snaps, whether it's a turnover or a 3 and out against Georgia. So this defense has only permitted a field goal. They've only been in the red zone. The opposition's only been in the red zone once, and that was when Clemson got down to the 5-yard line. only a handful of times have opposing drives gotten onto the other side of the field, past the 50. And the other team has only had 3 explosive passing plays of 20 yards or more in the entire year. 2 of those were in the Clemson game, and one of those didn't even get, it was a 44-yarder, didn't even get Clemson across half field or midfield. So this is a Georgia defense that, as long as you're seeing Jordan Davis sprint to the ball, as long as you're seeing Nakobe Dean, et cetera, being active, you don't need to worry about it, because the points are going to be at such a premium for the other team. The curiosity here is that, how dominant will this Georgia team be on defense? And then what's the offense look like? I mean, Carolina is not UAB. I would say they have better players. I don't know if they're a better team. That's a good question. But defensively, what Georgia's going to go up against on Carolina's defensive line, it will not be simple to run the ball like it was last year. I mean, that was just not fair. It will be more complicated to do that. Then again, Georgia's at home, and they're not dealing with an away crowd, even though last year's crowd was pretty sympathetic to the Dogs in Williams-Brice Stadium, which was a sight to see. That game last year was one of the oddest competitions I've ever seen, with the fog rolling in and just the way that I've been to Williams-Brice, I think like 15 times. And I just have never seen it in that state. And it was not exclusively because of the pandemic. Their fans thought they had no chance, and they didn't. And I do want to talk about the natural thing, the reaction here, which I'm sure y'all are going to be talking about below, which is the 2019 game. This isn't like that. There's a couple of different reasons why, but this is not like that. This is not a Carolina team right now that has, players on the defensive line the way they did at that time. And Georgia just couldn't run that day. It's not a noon game. It's at night. Georgia is not struggling offensively the way that it was, certainly in that game. So in one injury, like you saw in that game with Georgia's leaving receiver go down, they're just so much better at quarterback and functioning. The offensive coordinator is different. And obviously at Carolina, they are rebuilding, which they were not doing in 2019. So it's just a different situation. I mean, Carolina was almost a 20-point dog in that game. They're a 2.5, whatever it is, point dog in this game. It's just going to be hard for South Carolina. They are rebuilding. Georgia needs to jump on them immediately, build a double-digit lead, and then continue to fight every single down. This is not about how bad you beat Carolina on the scoreboard. This is about what you do to them on the field. It needs to be persistent. These Dogs have got something to prove. They will be playing right after the Gators and Bama. People will naturally compare them to that game as well as the Auburn-Penn State game. Georgia's, unlike all of those teams I just mentioned, Georgia's played a legitimate top-5 foe. None of them have. So we'll just see how this goes from here on out for the Gators and Bama, at Auburn and even Penn State. This is a game where you want to see Georgia completely dominate. If South Carolina is moving the ball, something's gone wrong, like way wrong. I don't see that happening. I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback, South Carolina. We'll just see. At Georgia, people are starting to think more and more that JT Daniels will start this game. We'll just see. I don't know. I think it would be in Georgia's best interest if he's healthy, the way that Kirby's sort of indicating that he's getting closer to being healthy. I think it's probably time to play him, and we'll just see, because at that point you will be almost 2 weeks away from when you will be 2 weeks away from when JT sustained that injury allegedly. There's so much misinformation that can come out, but that's for another time. But I expect Georgia to roll in this game. We'll see you over on the website, dogpost.com. We'll see you there.